So today we're talking about the topic of sleep, and I'm joined by Kat Ward and Dr. Claire Gilvray. And I'm wondering, Kat, if we can start with you and maybe just say a few words about yourself.
Hi there, my name's Kat. I'm currently studying children's book illustration at ARU. It's a master's, so I'm a mature student. And I've also been on a big wellbeing journey myself, and I'm supporting other students now as a peer wellbeing mentor, which I'm really enjoying.
Brilliant. And what is it that interests you about the topic of sleep?
Well, sleep has actually been a big one for me. I think, in my 20s, I definitely did not prioritise sleep in any way. When I was at uni first time, I was going out a lot. And also when I started working in London and things, I was working a lot and then going out a lot. And I kind of knew that sleep was important, but I didn't really kind of think about prioritising it as such. And then when a few years ago, actually, I got really bad burnout. So I started getting chronic fatigue and I basically stopped being able to exercise. If I did any exercise, I'd have to go to bed for a couple of days. It really impacted my life in a huge way because I really stopped kind of functioning. I used to walk really fast and then I found myself literally like walking at a snail's pace, so struggling with that. And yeah, my life became very limited. And so I've been on a big journey since then as well to kind of find ways to help my health and get back into a better place with it. And I've now realized, the fundamental importance of getting enough sleep and looking after yourself. And I'm in a much better place now. I did a 15K walk the other day, which I was so proud about because it wasn't something that I'd been able to do for a while, many years actually. So it's all steadily improving. I've gone from having to nap for a couple of hours every day and, really having to prioritize sleep to now getting into a bit of a healthier routine. But I still do find that it can slip. It's sometimes when you get busy and you have lots going on, it's like one of the first things that slips. So yeah, I think it's a really interesting topic and I'm so excited to be talking to you about it today.
Wow. So sleep for you has been a real impact on your well-being, on your health. And there are habits and routines that I heard in that as well. And I'm curious to know what you feel students need to know about sleep.
Yeah, well, I think it's a big one for students because, as I said, first time I went to uni, you can be away from home for the first time. The parental guidance is off. So you've got control of your life. You can you can stay up all night. No one's kind of monitoring you, whether it's going out or whether it's gaming or anything like that. Sleep could go out the window, and you also don't have the same structure that you might do when you're going to college or school. So you don't necessarily always have lectures to wake up for in the morning. So that then can push your bedtime much later because you're like, oh, I've got time in the morning to sleep in. And then that can then really push out your routine so that you're becoming, a massive night owl when naturally that might not be what's right for you. So I think it's a really important topic for students, actually. I'm really interested to hear what Claire's kind of advice and thoughts on it, because I just think personally, I can see that when I don't get enough sleep, my life doesn't function as well. I can get a lot of anxiety and, I don't feel good and things become a lot harder. So yeah, and I think that is very pertinent for the students at the moment as well.
Okay, great. Nice lead in there. Claire, let's bring you in. I wonder for our listeners, firstly, can you just say a little bit about you?
I am Dr. Claire Gilvray. I am a medical doctor. Can't believe it, but I've been a doctor now for 25 years, working in the NHS. And I originally trained as a psychiatrist because I was really interested in mental health and what goes on inside our heads. And then I retrained as a GP, mostly actually because I realised that most of what we see in primary care and general practice is actually mental health related, even if people aren't necessarily aware that it is. So I've kind of funneled my career now to sort of sit in that gap that unfortunately exists between sort of mental health and physical health services. And I'm really sort of passionate about what we can do with our lifestyle in order to improve both our physical and mental health. I am trained in CBT for insomnia, so sleep is a real special interest of mine. And I think in terms of what Kat's saying, it's something that impacts on all of us. So, if we have a one-off bad night's sleep, we will go in and tell people at work or at college or at uni that we've had a bad night's sleep. It makes us feel awful and grumpy and cross, and we just aren't at the top of our game. We're not able to function. And then what I see from the medical point of view is that we know that sleep now impacts on our physical health as well. So we know that if people chronically aren't sleeping, they're more likely to put on weight, they're more likely to have high blood pressure, they're more likely to have problems with their heart and immunity. I think that's a big thing in student health. Like whenever you're in that world of not sleeping and staying up every night and doing the gaming and doing the clubbing and doing whatever is your thing, then we know that we're more susceptible to picking up infections and those sorts of things, which I think, particularly even this time of year, is everywhere in the world of the young student population that I look after. So sleep's everywhere, massive topic.
Well, it impacts all of us, doesn't it? We all have to sleep. And what I'm really hearing and really excited about is you're both bringing a great deal to the table today. So I'm really curious about where this conversation goes and what it dips in and out of. And I might jump in every now and then, but by and large, I'm going to leave you two to bring your stuff.
I think my first question is, why is sleep so important?
So I think sleep is important for all sorts of different reasons. And on a physical level, it's the time that our body is kind of recovering from the day's events. So our kind of whole kind of muscular system, our cardiovascular system has to have a moment in time to kind of reset from being active during the day. And in terms of our psychological kind of health, again, it's another time where our brain is able to kind of lay down and process events from the day before in order for us, again, to be reset for the next day. And when we look at kind of all the kind of links into weight management and heart health and those sorts of systems as well, again, it's a time when our sort of endocrine system, which is the one that is to do with how we process sugar and insulin, things like that, is, again, it's another really important time for it to kind of be quiet, I guess, and be reset, and then be able to kind of gear up and trigger into a new day and the cortisol kind of kicking in the morning. So it is just that moment of rest and recovery that our body needs every day. And I think, again, the question that always comes up here is to do with how much sleep we should be aiming for.
How much should we? And is it the same for everybody?
No, I don't think it is the same for everybody. And I think whenever we look at kind of the research that's out there's a lot of pressure, isn't there, for people to be trying to hit the sort of 8-hour kind of amount of sleep. And actually for some people, they function and they get on great in life and they're very much not hitting that 8-hour kind of number. So I think whenever we look at the research, it's more about the quality of sleep rather than the quantity. I think there is some evidence to say that if you're down in the really low kind of amount of sleep, so you're hitting under the 5-hour window, that actually it's really quite harmful for us and our health. But actually there's quite a big scope of what could be normal for you. And I think, again, one of the things that if people are kind of coming to me and they want to try and improve their sleep, I would really try and encourage you to move away from focusing so much on the quantity and really kind of think about, okay, so how can I make what I am sleeping to be better quality? So to be getting more kind of deep sleep in there.
Then that actually leads me on to my next question. Do you have any tips? How do people get a good night's sleep? How do you get that quality sleep?
So quality sleep, I guess, to my mind is, again, it's about getting that deeper sleep in there. So we know that actually quality and depth of sleep is related a lot to do with what we actually do during the day. So whenever people come to see me and they're talking about trying to get a good night's sleep, they'll often start going, oh, I know all the best advice. I'm switching off my screen. I'm not eating late at night. They've heard all the kind of sleep hygiene. And actually, when it comes to depth of sleep, one of the best things we can do is about being active during the day and actually being out and around daylight earlier on in the day. So a good night's sleep starts first thing in the morning. It's that kind of cliche. I think that message is out there a little bit, but I think we often focus on the end of the day when actually we could be doing a lot to improve our sleep by, being active during the day rather than being so focused on the nighttime.
I wonder if I could just jump in here, actually. I was thinking about what you were saying, how you struggled with sleep and the impact of that on you. And I'm wondering if there's something here about body clocks as well, and whether a student body clock might be slightly different or it's something you've had to teach yourself, Kat.
I don't know. I think I probably my natural body clock, if I think about what I was like as a child, was definitely an early riser. So I don't know whether that is your natural body clock before external things kind of come in the way, but I definitely was an early bird when I was younger. And still now I much prefer waking up early and going to bed a bit earlier. But I think for a long time I was going to bed late. So it did throw out my natural body clock.
And I think that's fascinating, because I don't know that I'd necessarily been aware of the fact that we are genetically made to be either that early riser or that late night functioner. And actually, they can look at it on a global scale and where your kind of genetics are based as to which you're more likely to be. It's fascinating because actually, as you say, the issue tends to be that we live in a society which is expecting us to wake up at a certain time, go to our job or go to university or go to school, if we even bring it back into kind of teenage years. And actually, our body clock might be leaning us to a completely different timescale. And actually, you know, that burden of having to get up in the morning can be really, really tricky for your sort of night owl. Lucky for us if we're morning risers, because we've probably been able to function a lot more. But I have so much sympathy for people who are more a night owl, because actually for most jobs, for most courses, they're being forced to kind of clip their natural sleep early in the morning in order to kind of get up and function in society. It's really, really tricky. But I think the thing that you've touched on is it's really important to maybe reflect on yourself and to be able to say, this is my natural kind of window of sleep. This is what works for me, rather than maybe being so kind of drawn into what society's telling us that we should be doing, or what, you know, our lifestyle or our courses are telling us that we should be doing. Because there's definitely evidence that says that exists and we can't change that.
I think that's so important, isn't it? Because one size doesn't fit all. And if you're someone who naturally thrives, for example, on 6 or 7 hours sleep, you might not necessarily be needing to worry that you're not getting a full 8 hours sleep that kind of everyone's saying that you should kind of aim for. But I do think that's really interesting with the night owls and the morning people, because how does kind of advice for them differ? Because I've heard, for example, that the hours before midnight are more important than the hours after midnight in some ways. But so if you can get to sleep earlier, say 10 o'clock, that's much better than getting the same amount of sleep hours wise. But if you start it from 12, for example.
Yeah, which I don't see any evidence for that at all. So I think you're right. There's that comes up a lot in medicine, and that overlap that now happens into social media, and people maybe kind of giving opinions which aren't kind of research based or evidence based. And, you know, how does your body know what time of day it is really in order to when it's sleeping? So I think anyone that's listening to this, I really wouldn't be worrying about that as to what time you're getting your sleep at, and really not worrying so much about the number of hours that you're sleeping. And in fact, not worrying at all if you're kind of feeling well. Like if you're getting good night's sleep, then, you know, maybe there is something here about holding on to that and maintaining it and making sure it's a priority. But, you know, the conversations around maybe being a little bit more careful about routines and things around sleep are really there to help people who are struggling with their sleep. So it's a tricky world of kind of what you listen to. And I think you were saying about what would be the different advice, I guess, if you were a night owl versus a morning lark. And again, this is where my sympathy is there for someone who is more a night person, because what often they will do is they will do kind of what you were saying at university. We a lot of us did, where you did your course, you stayed up late, you got up again in the morning and you repeated. And actually that's often the night owl kind of tendency, where they have to get up for whatever they have to get up in the morning. They work late or party late at night, and they repeat and repeat and repeat. And then you get to the weekend and sort of try and recuperate and catch up and sleep by having a nice big long lie in at the weekend. And then unfortunately, what you're kind of doing is expecting your body to jump several time zones every single weekend. And that kind of core advice when it comes to improving our sleep, where we want to really think about trying to go to bed at the same time every night and get up at the same time every morning, which sets our body clock, which sets all our hormones in place, which helps us to have a good night's sleep. Actually, that's really tricky to do if you're kind of having that lie in at the weekend to catch up for during the week. So that's the problem, I think, and the as I say, the sympathy that I have for people who naturally want to be up later during the week.
Yeah, because and also that's really interesting what you said about time zones, because, for example, I found if I've had a late night, for example, or a few late nights, it's really hard to get back into the routine. It's really difficult to get back into the routine. Your body is then wired to stay awake for much longer. Some people seem to be able to do it very easily. You know, some people can go out or like stay out late one night and then just sleep normally the next night. But I find that it affects me for a number of days. And so then it throws your week off, and then it kind of gets into a vicious cycle.
Yeah, you're not alone in that at all. And we're so habitual when it comes to our sleep. And it links also across to the way that we're eating. So that kind of hunger pang that you get at the same time every day, because that's your body has got used to that, the time that you maybe have lunch or you have dinner. It's the same thing that's happening with our body clock with triggers around sleeping. Like our body expects it at a certain time, and we can use that to help us. But if we're kind of ignoring those signals, we keep going, often that trigger is lost, and we lose that kind of drive into good quality sleep at the time that our body's kind of looking for it. So habit's really a big thing when it comes to sleep, and you're not alone. And actually the group of people this comes up with, and it came up for myself a lot, was that if you're doing any shift work, again, that's really tricky. So again, as a medical junior doctor, I would do weeks of nights, for example, and then you're expected, the next week to drop back into day shifts. And actually, you're right. My body clock couldn't switch very quickly between them. And so what I'd ended up doing was staying awake most of that week, working through the night and being really broken by the end of the week. So some people are really sensitive, and some people, as you say, we often see the people, don't we, who are doing well at these things. And we sort of think that's how everyone's doing. And actually, so many of us struggle with sleep, but we don't often see that. I think that's part of the problem, isn't it? We think everyone else is fast asleep and having a lovely night's sleep, and they're all struggling.
And I think for students as well, it can be quite a complex issue, can't it? Because often students are studying, or mature students have families. They will be working as well. Students will be working perhaps late into the evening and weekends as well. And I'm curious, Kat, you were saying there was a real impact on your health, your lack of sleep and how sleep was disrupted. And I'm wondering what you did to kind of reset yourself in a way. And Claire, what you can say about how did we reset? How would a student be able to kind of reset themselves?
Well, at the time when I was dealing with kind of really bad chronic fatigue, I kind of had no choice, because my body wouldn't function to do anything else. So I did have to kind of, in some ways it was easier because I prioritized sleep because I had to. But now that I'm feeling a lot better, I still have some symptoms. So I still have to take it easy and be very mindful of it. But I've noticed, for example, I've just taken on a big project, and sleep is one of the first things to go, because there's a bit of nerves around it, a bit of excitement about it. My mind's kind of switched on a lot more. I think, this is not a uni project as such, but I think a lot of students have the same. You can get an assignment and you start working on your deadlines, and you're kind of maybe a bit worried about it. Your mind's kind of buzzing. You're working late into the night. And to be honest with you, I'm working out at the moment how best to manage it. So it's really kind of a work in progress for me. But I'm realizing that I've really got to prioritize sleep. I've really got to prioritize getting outside in the day as well, and just kind of coming up for air as well, and having connections with other people, and just making sure that everything that I've kind of put in place before the project started doesn't just suddenly disappear just because I've suddenly got really busy.
And I think the thing that's come across there is, and when we broaden this from sleep into our lifestyle generally, is that sleep's not there in isolation, is it? It does link to, whether we've been outside in the day and whether we've been able to be active. So if you bring chronic fatigue and your experience of that, when you're not able to be active during the day, you're missing that input that could be coming to help you sleep at night. In terms of, again, if we bring the night owl into the picture, then again, that sort of person is more likely to be snacking and eating, and we tend to make worse choices around what we're going to eat if we're awake at night, or maybe we're drinking significant amounts of alcohol or smoking or using some substances. And again, those things impact on sleep. So it's not just about sleep in isolation, it's all the other factors. And I think, your point about mature students and other kind of factors that are going on for anyone that's kind of listening, there's certain things we can be very good about our sleep, if we want to use the good word. I hate that, but we can be very good. We can be going to bed at the same time. We can be getting up. We can be getting our activity during the day. We can be great at our whole kind of a buffer zone, but the time that we kind of wind down before bedtime. But then what happens when our child wakes up in the middle of the night, or we have a hot flush, or, we live in an area which is really noisy and we're woken up in the middle of the night. So there's so many factors that are out of our control when it comes to sleep, that even when we're trying our best when it comes to trying to have a good night's sleep, we don't always manage to do that. So I think that's when it becomes really difficult as well. And so many of those things relate to being a student. As you say, if you've got assignments coming up and you're feeling more stressed, again, with all the best intentions, you're not going out, you're doing your work, you're switching off your screen. Again, just the stress of the day can be impacting on your kind of sleep at nighttime. And I think that's really frustrating and really difficult.
And I know that students that have come through the service as well, if they're house sharing, they might have very different routines to the people who they're sharing with, and doors are slamming and there's noise, and it can be quite disruptive for that person. And so they find themselves, at 2:00 in the morning with an app. And I'm wondering where what you both have to say about sleep apps and calm apps and things, and yoga nidra and all that kind of seems to be really important now as part of a sleep package.
Well, I was going to say, I think there's pros and cons, isn't there? So I'm interested that you dropped into all the ones that I would maybe say are helpful for sleep, but I'm not sure necessarily that's what everyone's reaching for. I suspect a lot of people are suddenly back on checking their WhatsApp or their social media, and that's actually what they reach for in the middle of the night. In a way, I'd be encouraged if they do go to something that's hopefully going to help them drop back into sleep. It's that double-edged sword, isn't it, when it comes to what's available for us in this world of internet being 24/7, not being able to be switched off. Some stuff is there which is really helpful, and some stuff which actually just overstimulates us and we can't switch off when we're looking at it. It's designed to draw us in and designed to stop us from switching off. And there's choices we can make, I guess, as to what we look at in the middle of the night.
Yeah, no, I totally agree. So I personally have found some sleep apps really helpful. Like Calm has been so helpful for me. The sleep stories on there are just amazing. Sometimes if I've woken up in the middle of the night and I really can't sleep, I would put on a movie or something like that just to completely distract my mind, because I think sometimes it's your mind that's kind of running away with you at a million miles an hour, and it's just like something you kind of need something to really calm you down. Another thing I find really helpful actually is writing. So I write out kind of all my thoughts and it just clears my head, and that really helps me then get back to sleep.
And I think there's a lot of evidence for that. It's sort of along that same line of how habitual we are about sleep, is that there is this thought that psychologically we become conditioned around sleep. So I know some people who will say to me, I can't fall asleep without, say, a movie playing or a radio station, or maybe it's white noise or something as simple as that. And their body or their mind actually has become really conditioned to associate that behavior with sleep to the point where they feel like they can't sleep without it. I think, again, when we think about the research and what we read about, and I guess it's part of the pillars of CBT for insomnia, one of the things that they would suggest doing isn't too different to what you're saying. If we're lying awake at night, rather than just sort of lying there, not sleeping, worrying about things in bed, there is a theory that it's worth getting out of bed and maybe doing exactly what you're discussing. So writing down, what you're worried about, so your brain knows that it's parked somewhere for the following day, putting on something to watch or listen to. But I think there does seem to be something here about not being in bed while you're doing that, to remove that expectation or conditioned response that actually then you're not sleeping, your brain's not expecting to sleep while it's in bed. So taking yourself to a chair or something beside the bed would probably be a good thing to do to improve on what you're already doing. But avoiding those long periods of time lying awake in bed is part of, as I say, it's one of the pillars of CBT for insomnia. And it happens so quickly. So if we can get into that practice of getting away from spending long periods of time awake in bed, the evidence says that about 80% of us will drop into a better sleep pattern within 2 weeks of changing that behavior. And And it is massive because, as we know, for the conversations around being a student and possibly living out of one room, I used to do it. I would sit in my bed and I would work and do a lot of things on my bed because it was the most comfortable place to be in my room. But actually, again, if we're not sleeping, one of the learnings that I've now got is that we're better not doing anything really on our bed, so that when we go at night time, we go to our bed, our brain knows this is where I'm expected to sleep. It's just a little small thing that we can maybe think about changing, but it can make a massive difference.
So Kat, I was just wondering about your role as a peer wellbeing mentor, and you're in contact with a lot of students, and I'm wondering what students might bring to you sometimes or just show up with in terms of their energies or sleep impact or lack of sleep, and whether stimulants, I hear a lot about energy drinks and coffee in the middle of the night, and is there any impact?
I think that's a big one, actually, energy drinks in particular, because with energy drinks, you can kind of keep going. You can have a very late night, and you can to some extent function the next day and the next day and the next day because you can keep going on them. But what kind of effect does that actually have if you are kind of not sleeping? Then you're having energy drinks or a lot of coffee during the day to keep you going through the day, and then that probably impacts your sleep at night, and then it becomes kind of a vicious cycle, doesn't it?
It's really tricky. And I think going back to that individual, not everybody being the same, there are some people who are so sensitive to those sorts of substances, be it the sugar, be it the caffeine, and some people who don't seem to have that much impact. So again, it's one of those ones I would encourage people not to look at what everyone else is doing and just be reflecting on yourself. But going back again to the conversation around what we get from sleep and why we're sleeping, actually, if we night after night are not sleeping, again, we know it just does impact on our physical health. The kind of peaks of sugar through the night are so bad for what our insulin's trying to do. And we are into the world of, we pick up every infection that's going around and we just physically feel unwell. But on a chronic level, we start to see kind of diabetes starting to creep in and issues around kind of weight gain and things like that. So as you say, in the moment, when we're taking the energy drink or the Pro Plus or the caffeine, it may feel like it's helping us to function, but actually underneath, it's starting to kind of damage us. And, again, the statistics are so massive for the impact of sleep towards our mental health. Anxiety and depression are much higher if we're not sleeping. And again, it feels like it's that short-term fix that we want to stay up that night because we've got the assignments, so we'll take the stimulants, we'll take the caffeine, we'll take the sugar. But actually, in the longer term, that's really going to be quite damaging for us. So I think it's a not a one-size-fits-all. Don't look at what everyone else is doing. Focus on yourself. But I think in terms of taking something that's stopping you from sleeping, not only is that going to be something that you're going to need to come away from, so that you learn to sleep again when you want to sleep again, when that assignment's done, or, whenever things have settled down, you want to have a good night's sleep, you're not going to be able to naturally drop back into sleep so easily. But also it is damaging. Again, sometimes these things creep up slowly and we're not so aware of it on the first night. But after a period of time, I think it's obvious to most people that they start to pick up every infection, they don't feel well. And then longer term, it's really quite damaging when it comes to our kind of physical and mental health.
I'm wondering at this point, it sounds like we've covered a lot of ground. What are the takeaways that you would offer a student about sleep?
Good question. I think what you actually said, Claire, was very reassuring in that you said it's possible to change your sleep patterns in 2 weeks. So if you actually start getting into the right routines and start kind of implementing some of the good things to get a quality night's sleep, it is possible to change, because it's not like, oh, I find it really difficult to sleep and that kind of is just an ongoing thing. It's actually like something that you can change.
And I think that's probably the thing I would say here as well, is that so you're not alone. This is really, really common. I think when we're lying awake at night and it's been night after night, it gets really detrimental how we feel. And I've met some people that everything else is absolutely fine, but they are broken because they're not sleeping. So I think the big message is that you're not alone. And actually, unfortunately, it's really quite common that yes, there's help. So sometimes it is just about coming and speaking to someone and being able to kind of think through strategies and how to improve things. So don't feel you have to kind of struggle with it on your own. And it's because I think some people will also say, oh, it's just my sleep. And actually, hopefully again from this conversation, we can all take away that actually it can really impact on us. I mean, you've had massive health problems with sleep kind of at the heart of that. So it can have a massive impact. It's not just sleep. So please get help if you're struggling with it. And then, the third one is probably, again, all the kind of things that we've been talking about, is realizing that things can improve really quite quickly, that just having some strategies around going to bed at night and getting up in the morning, thinking about being active during the day. And that thing about coming out of your bed space as much as possible whenever you're awake in the middle of the night. But, please come and, Julie will maybe talk about services and things that are available here, but asking for some help is so important, I think.
Thank you both very much. For the topic of sleep, I'm feeling really energised. If you've been impacted by anything we've spoken about in this episode, please reach out to the Counselling and Wellbeing team and make the most of the support we can offer you. Visit aru.ac.uk/wellbeing to find out more about our service and how to get in touch.